Hello, this is your color correction instructor, Taz Talley. In this video, I'd like to show you a little tool and technique combo that's really super helpful. That can help you very rapidly and very accurately identify specular highlights, diffuse highlights, shadow detail areas, and plugged-in shadow areas. Now, you can just visually look around an image like this, and you get a pretty good sense for, well, where some of the highlight areas are. Like you might take a look here, look at the reflection and say, that's very likely a specular highlight. And remember that a specular highlight is a highlight area that's not necessarily supposed to have detail. If it's blown out, it's pure white, 255, it's fine. Then there's the diffused white highlight area, or diffuse highlight area, that is very bright but has detail in it. And you always want to distinguish between those two in an image. So when you look at an image like this, particularly when you're going to do RGB, quantitative analysis of your image, you really would like to identify and then measure and then monitor diffuse highlights, specular highlights, deep shadow areas with no detail, or deep shadow detail areas. All four of those, if they're all present. So you can visually look at this image, and it's kind of hard to find out or determine, well, just where is the diffuse highlight in this image. And if we're lucky, is there a diffuse white highlight? You bet. This white shirt is probably a good place to look for not only a diffuse highlight, that it's a highlight area that has detail, but a white one that allows us to do color balance measurements and then helps guide us in our adjustments when we do color balance adjustments. So probably going to be somewhere in the white shirt. Some people might think, looking at the white teeth are not white unless they're unnatural, but a white shirt, this white plate is a potential area. Even the white in the label for the wine bottle, those are all potential neutral white highlight areas. What we want to do is find the lightest highlight area that still has detail. If there is a specular highlight, we can identify it and isolate it, and maybe or maybe not monitor it. We want to look for shadow detail area and if there are any blown out areas. So that's what we're going to look at here, and we want to get it. Are there any tools and techniques we can use to help us identify those? Well, there is. We're going to go back to our old friend, the curves tool. And for this particular exercise, here's our standard color correction work setup space, right? Our workspace. I'm just going to take this histogram and info panel, and I'm just going to swap sides here because I want to get our properties panel with the curves right up next to it. And then rather than guessing at where the diffuse highlight or the specular highlight of this image is, we're going to use our properties panel and we're going to use our curves dialog box. And here we can just use the master curve. And when we come up underneath this menu here, click on the menu and choose show clipping for black and white points. By default, that is turned off. So choose the menu and turn this on, and then it'll have a checkbox next to it. The other thing you can do, if you don't want to turn that on, is you can just hold down your Option key, Alt on Windows, and do what I'm about to do. But by turning that on, it makes it a little easier. You don't have to hold down any Shift keys to do what I'm about to show you. So we're going to show clipping points either using the menu or the Option or Alt key, and then you just come down here and you click on the highlight end on the master histogram, click on it, and you just click on it, notice almost everything goes dark, except for you see some areas in this image that are lighting up, like they have a light strip on them, like an LED light strip on them. Those are areas that are already blown out. So when we click here, we can see the areas of this image where it's already 255. Right? And then if we drag this over to the left, we see those areas start to expand. Right? What we're doing is we're identifying the lightest pixels in this image. And because this image is obviously a little bit overexposed, it's not awful, but it's a little bit overexposed. There's already some areas that are already blown out, and they're at 255. And those are the areas that are occurring as white here. All right? So click and then drag, and then you just start to drag, and then that helps you in this one because remember we identified two areas like these reflections here, and maybe somewhere in the white shirt, we might want to have a diffuse and or a specular highlight. Reflections tend to be speculars, right? Cloth tends to be more diffuse. If we click here on this little highlight end here, and we just barely drag it over to the right, watch the reflection area. So I move this back and forth. You see the reflection area starts to go white just a little bit before the collar does. Look at the white collar now. You'll know that this area of the white collar starts to go white first. But you'll notice the reflection goes pure white just a little bit before, meaning it's just a little bit brighter than the shirt. All right, then the area of the shirt. See how the reflection is already, there's small areas at the top of the reflections that are pure white, whereas there's still a little bit of color showing up, the color pixels in the collar, the shirt collar. So they're just a little bit lighter in there. All right, as we drag it to the left, the areas, the highlight areas really open up, right, as far as what's being blown out. That's because I'm moving my highlight slider over to the left, from right to left, and blowing out those areas as I go. We're not making an adjustment here. We're just identifying the white highlight areas in this image. So I can, let's put down 2 color sampler points here. All right, and just to review, remember, we set up our eyedropper tool, keep it on there, 3x3 average for measurement of our eyedropper tool, and then we're just going to drag it over to the left, and we're going to see right up in here, watch this area right here, as we drag it over from right to left. See how that lights up? I'm going to space and command, I'm going to zoom in here. All right, and I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to try to figure out where's the lightest area in this image. See how that top part of that opens right up? That's a very narrow area in there. Right at the top. You know, if I've got a 3x3 average, I'm going to have to be careful where I put my color sampler point tool. But I'm going to hold down my shift key, and I'm going to place a color sampler point right there. All right? I'm not going to put, this is the lightest area here. If I were to use this, I'd have to use a point sample. And I could if I wanted to, but I'm going to stick with my 3x3. And remember, when you get something set here like this, you can zoom in and go, oh, I want to move that a little bit over, up a little bit. Just hold down your shift key, all right, and you can move it around. All right, all right. I want to stay away from this area up here because that's going to be sampling some additional pixels. So somewhere right in here for our white highlight. I'm going to go Command 1 to take me back to full view. And then let's go back over to here. And let's look at the lightest area of the collar. And let's space Command, zoom in here. And again, find out where the lightest area of this collar is. Boy, it pops out in a real hurry, doesn't it, as you drag it over there. But we can see a nice, right in here. Now, how anal do we have to be? Not particularly, as long as we get close, all right? I will admit I tend to be pretty anal about where I put my color sampler points. But if you're anywhere close to where that is just popping and going pure white, you're going to be good to go. All right, Command 1 or Control 1 to go back to 100% view. Remember, you could always hit your space bar to move your page grabber hand around, and it always goes back to the eyedropper tool. I just stay in the eyedropper tool when I'm doing color correction. So there we've got our 2 color sampler points. And then let's move over here and look and see what we've got. Color sampler point 1, number 1, 246, 245, 255. Color sampler point, that is what we thought is close to a specular highlight. Then up here in the collar, look at 246, 245, they're almost identical. And we saw that when we dragged the slider over, didn't we? All right. We know that the very top of the specular highlight is a little bit brighter, but it's just this one rim here. But I put my color sampler point here because I know it's giving me a 3x3. Notice because we're measuring it with a 3x3, if I move this up here, notice it goes 247, 246, 255. It's a little bit lighter, but not much. Point being that those two, in this case, the specular, the reflection, and the diffuse white highlight are pretty darn close to each other. Which one are we going to pay attention to? This one, all right? Because we don't really care what this value is. We know it's going to be a little bit lighter. This is the one we want to set at our 5% white highlight. But now we've set a diffuse white highlight, a specular. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention, I always go in descending order from the lightest highlight down to the deepest shadow. I go 1, 2, 3, 4. I do that in every single image, no matter what images it is. So I know when I set up an info panel, the number 1 point is always the lightest highlight in that image. Could be specular, could be diffuse. Very often it's the diffuse, because not all images have specular. And then I just move down my tonal scale, all right? And then let's take a look at the shadow area, all right, and do the same thing, all right? In this case, we're going to go back to our properties panel, look at our master histogram underneath our curve tool, and instead of clicking and dragging on the highlight end, we're going to click and drag on the shadow end. And that is going to fill in the shadow. It's going to show you the areas of the image where the shadow is filled in. Now remember, on the highlight end, we just clicked on it. We could see some areas that were already blown out. Not very many, just the very edges of some of those really white areas, right? And the reason why those are white is because there's a light source right up here in the upper left-hand corner. Well, when we click on the shadow area, we see there's some big areas that are already pure black. All right, now those are going to be no detail areas. Notice when I put my cursor over here, let's just take our info panel and just snug it up under here. And I know that's going to be 0. Look at the info panel, the eyedropper, right? There's no data in here. It's all 0, 0, 0. So, and I can tell that is just an area of no detail at all. All right, so that's going to be the deepest shadow with no detail. What I'm interested in is I would like to monitor the area that has shadow detail in it. All right, and notice that some of the hair up in here is. And let's just put this down over here. Let's put this up here so we can monitor it. Notice that some of the shadow area is right down in 0 too. So this, interestingly, this image is both overexposed and underexposed. Very, very bright white up here, but we've got some deep cast shadow area here where there's no detail. So, and we can see that in the histogram, can't we? We've got spikes on the highlight end, spikes on the shadow end. What we're interested in right now is shadow area where there's still detail, all right? So I'm going to click on this, and then I'm just going to start dragging it over to the right as I go. And there's a couple of areas I could choose here. I know the hair is already pure black, that area up in there, so it's kind of shot. Is there anything else in here I could look at? Sure. I could use the hair, but notice that, look at the black areas, the dark areas of the tie. All right, see those? See, those are just starting to come out, going pure black. So I could zoom in, all right, and I could space command and zoom in and put a color sampler point. And again, and I'm doing this very slowly so we can talk about it. You can do this in just 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. Look, now we can really see which area is darkest, right? That's coming out, right? At first I thought it was this area here, but it's not. It's right in through here. So I'm going to shift click, all right, put a color sampler point, and put this right back. All right. I could command 1, control 1, all right, space bar, move this back into the center. I could also put one up in her hair. All right, let's go ahead and space and zoom in. Space bar, page grabber hand, and let's see where the darkest areas of the hair are. Oh, look, there is still some detail in there. Oh, so this is an area we do want to measure. Oh yeah, right about in here. Let's put another color sampler point there. Boom. All right. And notice when I put this all the way back over to the right side, to the left side, and we've got our color sampler point there. And again, I'm being very anal, so you really have a chance to talk about this. All right. As I drag this over, I can see which areas go black first. And those are the areas that are filling in. So I could shift, move this over to get, if I want to get it exactly on the right place. There we go. Command 1, go back to 100%, space bar, move this back together. And then finally, we've got this deep dark shadow area down here, all right, where we click on here. I know this is going to be pure black, but we'll just put a color sample point there anyway, just for grins. So what have we got? And you always make sure you put these back to the original position, so we're not making adjustments here. We're just identifying specular and diffuse white highlights, 3 different shadow areas, and let's just take a look at our values. The number 1, which is the specular, 247, 246, 255. All right, these 2 values, the red and green, not bad, right? They're mid 240s, not bad for a white diffuse highlight. So part of this reflection is really, it's got some detail in it, but the blue is blown out. Same thing in the other diffuse highlight, which is just very slightly lighter, but that's the most important one, all right? Because we want to make sure there's detail on that color. 246, 245, again, the 255 is blown out. All right, so we know we've got a really good diffuse white highlight point. And whatever we set this is going to be brighter, but we don't care because it's basically a specular highlight. Then number 3 is our shadow detail area where we know we've got some good shadow detail, 24, 32, 10. The blue is a little bit low compared to the red and the green here. Now, notice that these white highlight areas, these are neutrals, these are whites, these are neutrals, all right? And this indicates in both the specular and the diffuse that we've got the blue is higher than the red and the green, all right? So that's indicated we've got what? A blue color cast in this image, right? We can see that right off the bat. And in fact, when we look over here, just a little bit of a sidebar, when you look at your histograms, we see that's confirmed. See how the blue histogram is offset to the right of the red and the green? Once again, the histogram analysis and the RGB quantitative analysis agree with each other, right? We're not really, that's not what we're digging into right now, but this is what you can glean by placing these color sample points and then thinking about them. So number 3 is a good shadow point. Number 4, right, which was the hair, boy, that's tough. Or 111, it's pretty close to 0. There's not a lot of detail in there. And then our true deep shadow, 000. Now, I probably wouldn't worry about this point at all. And if, for this particular image, I might just set, if I were working like in standard color correction workflow, I'd for sure set this point as the diffuse highlight, and I'd set this one as the shadow. And I might try to lighten up the hair just a little bit. There's not a lot of detail in there, but if I wanted to make sure the hair came out, I could use that. I might use both points and lighten up the shadow a little bit. And we'll get a chance to do this later on. Right now, I'm just showing you how you can identify diffuse highlights, specular highlights, and then various shadow details areas in the image, and set your color sample points using this little tool and technique tip here. Boy, and we're taking many minutes to go through and talk about this in detail, but this can be done literally in seconds, and you can set your color sample points and have a great deal of confidence you're going to be measuring and monitoring the most important areas in the image. That is the lightest, in this case, diffuse white highlight, and then the darkest area that has shadow in it, here the tie and perhaps the hair, if that's salvageable, which it might be. So there we go. There's how to use your properties panel, your curves master channel, and remember, you turn this on by showing the show clipping for black and white points, and or you can just hold down your Option or your Alt key if you're working in Mac or Windows. I just turned it on so that it makes it easy. I just click and drag and click and drag, and I have to hold down anything. So that's it. It's locating color sampler points, critical color sampler points in your image using your curves and the clipping points.